There are two quotations from the discipline that I've always been attracted to. The first is, in essentials, unity; in non-essentials, liberty; and in all things, charity. Maybe as you talk about schism, maybe we're past that point. But is it worth talking about what are our essentials and what are our non-essentials?
Well, that's the issue. The General Conference of 2016 did not adjourn. They agreed to put it in the hands of a smaller group who are to bring a proposal either in 18 or 19, and it looks like it's not going to come in 18, but in 19, the hope is that this group that's being brought together will bring a proposal that will help us stay together. That's where we are at the present time. I have lots of opinions about this thing, but I prefer not to share them in this particular issue. They've got to do their work, and we'll see what comes out of it. In my own personal understandings of where our church stands in the Constitution, not in the rest of this stuff. In the Constitution, it's very clear that we understand it's by the grace of God we are who we are.
That's right.
Why, in the grace of God, do some of us come with the same gender desire we didn't choose, we discovered, and others have an opposite gender desire? What makes one better than the other? We're going to be dealing with a lot of tradition. It's got to be exposed and determined. We may have to pay a very serious price, so to speak, for what I believe the love of God includes for me and you and you and you and whoever gets a chance to listen to this or look at it. And it isn't because of our gender preference. That's a given.
See, I think that's a non-essential,
But that's the issue.
but we've made it essential.
The essential, yeah.
We've made it,
That's-
the essential.
That's the issue.
That's right.
Essential for me is, and pretty much in the language of the Constitution, that we covenant together to believe that at the heart of the universe is that great mystery that we call God, that is about yes and not no. That's about grace and not judgment. That's about hospitality and not hostility. It's about welcome. It's about reconciliation. It's about forgiveness and moving into the future. And as Christians, we say, in and through Jesus Christ, that was most clearly manifested. Now, at that point, we debate. Some on the right side of the aisle say, well, he's the only way. It's Christocentric. Others of us would say, well, that's the norm. That's the way we, standing under the revelation of Jesus, go. Those are essential things to talk about. But either way you go on that, non-essentials, like do you smoke, drink, or chew? When I was a child, those were the big issues. Or play cards. I can remember as an evangelical, I'm talking about 5 times a week in church, evangelical, the biggest moral issue I was struggling with was, is it a sin to go to church or to go to the movie on Sunday? It was okay Friday and Saturday, but there was a question, if I go to the movie on Sunday and Jesus returns, will I go to hell?
Yeah, of course.
That kept me awake at night. Imagine that, a kid, huh? Well, I think we're doing a similar kind of thing to folks today. And some, whether they're gay or straight, are saying, to hell with that. I can find grace somewhere else if it's not in the church, whether you're Ugandan or Columbusan.
I have colleagues on both sides of the fence who are serving appointments that are really not compatible with their theology or their politics. What advice did you have and do you have for active pastors who are in those situations, who are They don't see eye to eye with their congregations.
Listen.
That's right.
Listen, you might learn something. Listen and tend and do the pastoral care and preach the gospel as you see it without judgment, and listen. You can live together. You can model grace. What an opportunity.
That's right.
That's what we always say to pastors when we appoint them, isn't it? I've got an opportunity for you. But that is an opportunity to learn.
Yeah, I think if you're on the liberal side, it's and you're always talking about justice and loving folks out there, and you fail to manifest that love in here close with people who are different from you, you're phony baloney, and people smell that out right away. But if people experience you, whether you're left or right, it doesn't matter, as genuine, a person who really does seek to live in and manifest the wondrous grace of God revealed in Jesus, there's room then for grace. I'll give you an example. A month ago, I was called to see if I would go back to Cincinnati to do a funeral for a person I hadn't seen in 50 years. Their church no longer is. Inner City Church no longer is. She and her family and their whole big Sunday school class and I fought. We fought like cats and dogs the first 2 years I was there. Why? Because I let peaceniks sleep in the sanctuary, because I dared to bring black people into the congregation, on and on and on. But there was a death. The mother of one in this group died, and somehow she and I had gotten on. She loved me and I loved her. She said, I want that young pastor to do my service. As a result of that group and I, we didn't agree, but we began to care for each other. I became the shortstop on their baseball team. That was a plus. They liked that. Huh? But the point is, when the kids went through the family stuff, if we can get Joe to come back, wouldn't that be wonderful? And I don't mean this immodestly. It's an example of what you're talking about. Sure. He was the pastor they remember because he loved them. And so that's what I always said to pastors. And I also said this: we have your back. Our system has your back. That is to say, you do your work, you love, you care, you listen, you preach, you act with integrity. And if it doesn't work, we have your back. This isn't a Baptist church where your job's up for grabs every Wednesday night after prayer meeting. We have your back. Another story. In that same church, some of the folk that first year called the district superintendent in. Pardon the language, but they said, we want to get rid of that in-lover. We don't want an in-lover as our pastor. Ed Dickey of Sacred Memory was the DS. Ed sat and listened for almost 2 hours. And then he said this, I've never forgotten this. Well, friends, when I was a young man, a student at the Ohio Wesleyan University, Dr. So-and-so, Dr. Somebody Smith, Sociology of Religion, said, if a young man isn't radical, pray God what will he become when he's middle-aged. This meeting is dismissed. Now that's having somebody's back, Jimmy. Huh?
Bishop Craig, I talked with you earlier about your history with King Avenue. Back in the 90s, when you were bishop for the West Ohio Conference, King Avenue went through a period of with Grace and Atha of Grace and baptizing children of same-gender couples and including gays in the church and in the leadership of the church. And the SPR committee voted one night to have Grayson removed and communicated that to you. What did you do?
They did indeed, with some heat. I met with them, and I listened to them, and I listened to their complaints about Grayson, and they had already voted to study homosexuality and try to get their hands on it. You know, what is this reality? And I said, why would you want to lose Grayson when you're about to enter into this study? He's the very person that ought to lead that study, and he's going to stay here and lead it. They were not happy, but I had listened to them for a long time before I said that. And so they knew I knew what was going on. Grayson stayed, and it worked well. It evolved into a really fine ministry, as you know.
Yes. I'm the beneficiary.
Yes, you
of those
are.
decisions.
Well, one of the strong urban churches in
right.
Columbus. One of the very few strong United Methodist urban churches in the conference.
That's right. That's called, yeah, I had Grayson's back.
Indeed.
You know what? It was fun. I think about that, and I think that was one of the fun things I did, because I think it was
Amen.
right.
Amen.
So how are you going to do it today?
Well, the first
Let's
thing I
see,
do, first thing I do is thank God every night that I retired before there was a charge about a gay wedding in West Ohio. That's my first thing. I tell you what, I think a lot about that, though, Joe. I think about my predecessors and what has been put on their table, and I pray for them. But I think I cannot say what I would do
Right.
until I sat in their chair and heard what they heard about
right.
the situation.
That's right.
But I know my desire would be to find a just resolution, whatever. And if I appointed a pastor to a congregation where there were gays and lesbians and that pastor was offended by their presence, I think rather than let the pastor do harm to them, I'd put the pastor somewhere else.
Yes, I agree. I agree. When I mentioned the pain I've carried all these years about the trial, when Greg and I talked, and we talked often, as I did with the persons who signed the complaint, Greg and I agreed that this could potentially be a teachable moment for the church, because Greg had a great reputation as a pastor, quite apart from any issue. He was creative, was a wonderful preacher, pastoral call person, just cares. He had all the gifts and graces that you want. And I thought, and Greg didn't say this, but I thought that the church, the whole church, putting one of the most faithful, able persons through this horrendous experience, don't we see what we're doing to one another?
Yeah.
Didn't teach, well, it might have taught
Oh, it
some of
taught
us
some.
something,
It taught
but it
some.
was a small ripple in a big pond.
It was not what you had hoped
It
for.
was
I'm
not what
sure.
I hoped for, no.
Why would you recommend the United Methodist Church to a seminary student who is trying to decide on what denomination to serve in? What would you say to that
Well, for one
student?
thing, we haven't walked away from the issue. And the issue will stay there as long as Joe Yakel's alive. And I think the other Joe and the gal who took her position very well would say the same thing. I have no intentions of leaving because of this issue, and I will fight it as long as I have a chance to do so. And I'm sorry the word fight comes in there, but that's what the issue has already been laid before us. As I talked about the Wesleyan Association, when you get that number of persons, you know, even the Council of Bishops has got to be challenged on this issue. Mel Talbert did not marry that couple.
John,
And no one
I'm
took the
sorry.
time to go and see who signed the marriage license to know who married that couple. The Supreme Court has made the issue very clear to us. Any two persons have the right to form a corporate unit, which is a privacy unit, and have all of the rights and privileges of those who are a male and a female, as opposed to two males or two females. That's the day we're in, and the church has got to stay with it and work at it. And we will ultimately come to that decision and be faithful to our commitment to the Christ whom we serve. I have no doubt about that.
John, I would respond to that kind of on the one hand, on the other hand. On the one hand, social holiness is a gift that on the one hand, the individual, his or her spirituality absolutely must be developed, but at the same time, there's a social dimension. And I think when we're at our best as Wesleyans, it's both beats. On the one hand, the inward, and on the other hand, the outward. That's marvelous. And then how do you sort out? One person said to me once when I asked about a very vexing social issue, what should I do? He said, Sprague, just do the right thing. Well, I try to do the right thing. One thing about United Methodism is we have a game plan for trying to determine what the right thing is. It's called the quadrilateral, that you need not do in the closet by yourself. It should be worked in community, for community, and for the individual. Those are wonderful gifts. Head and heart together. Tough mind, tender heart, as Dr. King taught, although he was a Baptist. So that's why I would push. On the other hand, when I was the bishop in the Chicago area, I had 45 or 50 gay and lesbian clergy who were ordained in the conference. And most of them came out to me. They were not living outside the discipline. They were within the discipline, but they were gay and lesbian clergy. And often they would ask me, friend to friend, clergy to bishop, why should we stay in the United Methodist Church? And my answer was, not an answer, my response was, as a white male, heterosexual in a power position, I don't have any right to tell you to stay inside this church. But what I will say is, if you decide to stay after prayer and searching, A, the church needs you, the United Methodist Church needs you, and B, some of the rest of us need you that we might stand together. But you're paying the biggest price, not me.
Well, seminary students, my time at Methodist Theological School graced me with the opportunity to talk to a lot of young, coming clergy who sometimes were struggling with this. Shall I be a United Methodist? And I would talk a lot about what Joe has just said, the quadrilateral, the community making decisions, head and heart. That's easy. That's the good stuff.
That's right.
But what was hard was when it was a gay student.
That's right.
And they had yet to go through the process. And they wanted advice on how to do that. And I had to say to them, as long as you are willing to be closeted, to be single, to pay that kind of price, your gifts and your grace will be welcome in the United Methodist Church. But if you are compelled to tell the truth to the Board of Ordained Ministry, I can't guarantee what will happen.
Sure.
Well, now there are some boards of ordained ministry that would look the other way on that. That wasn't the case when I was counseling students, and I knew it wasn't. That was the really hard time for me. We lost to the United Church of Christ out of Methesco a lot of talented new clergy because we're so stubborn, because we're so hung up.
Right.
And what a sad, sad thing.
I'll conclude on this thank you note. For my Christmas Eve sermon, I was reading a sermon by William Sloane Coffin called Christian Obedience, which struck me as a strange title for a Christmas Eve sermon. And he made the distinction between discerning obedience, which is motivated by love, and blind obedience, which is motivated by power. And I feel that our discussion this afternoon has been about your discerning obedience to Christ, to the church, to the discipline, to the covenant. And I want to thank you for your discerning obedience. Thank you.
Thank you.
And your observance that we have very little power.
I hope you got that.